All right. Good morning, Ben. How
So
are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. Just back from a great trip in Michigan the last week or so, a little
Hmm.
bit less. It's fantastic. We, as you know, we acquired a, just a fantastic firm group of people out there in Traverse City, Michigan, and it was great to be out there to see them, meet a number of clients. It was a great trip.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, good to have you back. And I love that crew too. So it
Mm,
speaks to my heart. Um,
yeah.
I was wondering if we could spend some time talking about, since I know you've been speaking with clients a lot, and you do anyway,
Mm.
but in particular these days, and just wondering what's on people's minds. What are people concerned about? Um, Especially folks who are perhaps either in retirement or approaching retirement in this moment in time.
You know, well, a lot of things, right? I mean, for that particular people, either very soon going to be entering retirement or already in retirement, it is obviously one of the biggest transitions somebody goes through, right? I mean, you're transitioning from, in most cases, a place where you have earned a living, earned a salary from either a company, or you owned a business and perhaps had a liquidity event, or, for example, sold the business to somebody else so that you could retire. Maybe you passed it down to family members, and maybe that's been a process over the last number of years to hand that off. Or perhaps you just more traditionally just retired. You worked for a company for a period of time, or companies for a long period of time, and retired. It is an interesting emotional
Mm.
transition in a number of ways, right? Financially speaking, I think to get back to answering your question, um, it's also an emotional time financially, regardless of what might be happening in the economy or the markets at that time. Right now, you're transitioning the way I conceptually think about retirement. Been doing this and working with people that are in this space, right? Transitioning from their working lives to their retired lives, and it's going from a salary, as we talk about, from the company that you worked for, and transitioning to essentially the same thing. You're taking a salary, of course, right, to fund your living expenses in retirement, but now that salary is coming from the amount of capital that you've accumulated over that past period of time, right? Your retirement portfolio.
Mm.
And that's an emotional switch for because now there's, I guess, the biggest thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is it's real. I was working. I had the power to impact how much I worked, or whether or not I stayed at a particular job, or went somewhere else in my working life to earn more money. You had that power, you had that ability to market yourself and make more money. And now you transition to a point where, oh, okay, now I'm living off of my portfolio, which is fantastic from my perspective in terms of thinking about all the possibilities there. But certainly there's an element of emotion and perhaps fear and trepidation about, oh geez, I, at least the feeling I get from talking to a lot of folks, many folks that go through this, is, geez, I'm losing a little bit of control over my financial well-being. That's, in a nutshell, that's what I sense in here, not just today,
Yeah.
my entire career. This is a big, one of the biggest transitions folks go through, and there's that feeling of a little bit of a loss of control over their financial circumstances or well-being.
Which is kind of crazy because isn't that what people want anyway, right? Everybody wants to be free, but then once they're
Mm-hmm.
free, you kind of don't like, oh, this is a scary
Yeah,
place. You got to rely on myself,
right.
right?
Yeah, yeah. I suppose in so many ways, yeah. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that we want to be free from the job or the career that you've been at for so long, perhaps. And it's not that it's negative, it's just moving into that transition of life, retirement, and dealing with your finances now in a little bit of a different way. It's just different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's difficult for many folks, various levels, to get used to. It's, I would say the word is, it's just unfamiliar.
Mm. That's a good reframe. That's a good reframe. I also think about as you're speaking, we say retirement, and for people who are maybe like not in their 60s, they may think like, man, that's like so far off. What do I need to do listening to this? Like, why am I listening to this? But so many people, first of all, time passes by very quickly. That's just a fact. The second
Mm-hmm.
thing is that so many people quit or change directions over the past few years. Like during the pandemic, so many people decided,
Mm-hmm.
well, yeah, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do whatever, XYZ. And so in some ways, whether they were or weren't at traditional retirement age, they may have become more self-reliant in some ways or
Mm.
needed to. And this is a relevant topic, regardless of what one's age is or life stage is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And to your point about folks becoming more self-reliant and perhaps more folks being forced to adapt and adjust given the pandemic and everything that went through. Um, Perhaps that does prepare folks for making decisions in retirement. I think it's also, to me, sitting back and taking a look at, geez, there are, because of the ongoing and relentless increase of technology and just how the economy works, how capitalism works. There are a lot of different ways these days to make money or enhance your income and so on. We saw that come to the forefront in certainly the pandemic and people having to be at home and everything. So, but I think it's still, for somebody that is making that transition, it still can be a difficult one to adjust to, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what about people who are like potentially freaking out? Maybe that's too strong a term, but getting very
Mhm.
concerned when they're about to retire, or maybe they just retired last year, and all of a sudden the market starts doing this up and down business.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, what do you do with those folks?
Yeah. It's funny. You make me think of one of my longest standing clients, and how I remember when he became a client years and years ago. One of the things he said to me, I was talking to him on the phone. We had already gone through the planning and many conversations, and he's like, "Hey Ben, okay, we're all, sounds like we're all ready to get everything implemented based on the plan that we worked so hard to put together. But I have one request." And I'm like, "Okay, great, yeah. What is it?" And he said, um, "Right before you implement my portfolio, I want you to call all your clients and tell them to get the hell out of the market."
And so we're all set to go, and he makes this one request, says, "Hey, I need you to do something right before we get everything invested." I said, "What's that?" He said, "I want you to call all your clients and tell them to get the hell out of the market." I'm like, "Why?" He says, "Every time it seems like I've invested in my life, when I put money to work or invest in something, everything goes to crap for the next 6 months or so." And that was a good laugh, of course. And he was just fooling around. But it is it does shine a light on a common feeling that I'm about to make this huge, huge, impactful decision, and everything has to go right from the get-go and throughout. And, you know, when it comes to all of this money that someone has accumulated for long periods of time, and then going back to the concept of switching from a salary from a job to salary from your portfolio, and perhaps losing a little bit of that control, I think folks today and prior, right? It's no different, is that it can be approached a little bit of trepidation. And to your question, going into retirement today, or really over the last few years, and having to experience the pretty good amount of volatility that we've seen, it can be challenging emotionally for folks to approach that. And that's what I'm talking to a lot of folks about right now, is they're, you know, investigating or digging more into what's driving the fear behind, you know, some of the things that they're thinking about right now. And because we know, right, we know that historically speaking, certainly the market always trends upward, and that these volatile periods, while it feels like the last few years we've had a few of them, which we have, are in fact temporary, and things move on to higher highs over time. So it's that ongoing conversation, just to help people understand that despite what the perceived causes are of these patches or periods of time, it's important to focus on the things that you did together, or at least that you hopefully did with the financial advisor, to properly plan and fund your portfolio with investments in a plan to ensure, to the extent possible, that your hard-earned capital ends up outliving you. That makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. And then there's a part of me that really wants like something to touch and hold, right? It's like, okay, this all sounds great and I buy into it, but what about for those people who go pragmatically? Okay, what about what's my cash flow situation going to be like? Like, who knows? We may be in a dip for a year or a little bit longer, or 2 years. What do I do during this time? So some like pragmatic approach to weathering 1 or 2 or 3 years of, I don't know, a down market, if one could call it that.
Yeah, and especially early retirement, I think certainly what we do, at least, I think is in fact a pragmatic approach. It's, look, let's go into retirement. Let's plan to go in retirement with 2 years of money set aside for contingencies. And that contingency, the big one, is something that we, in our business, the fancy term, I suppose, is called sequence of returns risk, if that's what you're asking about. And essentially what that is that what is the impact on someone's long-term retirement income if, particularly in the early parts of retirement, the first few years of retirement, the market goes through a period of time where, and I'm not saying it's this one particularly right now, I'm talking about a long, deep, protracted bear market. And so what we do as a pragmatic approach is to plan, as retirement is approaching, to set aside a comfortable amount of money, and that's determined by their approximate or expected living expenses in the first few years of retirement. So very simply, that if we do go through an extended time period of tough markets, that you have a cash that represents a period of time, 2 years is often what we use, that you can use to fund your lifestyle while the market ends up recovering, which it always does. And so that is, to me, as much as it is a calculated and financial approach, it really serves to be more of an emotional cushion for folks to just, think about it. It's like let's say that's you, and we say, okay, you've got 2 years of your needed income set aside in the bank. So then I'll turn the question around. Then what does that do for, I would say, most folks? Does that provide a source of comfort knowing that, okay, there is this fear and of this uncontrollable market force that I'm in retirement now, right? And we know we don't have any control over what the markets do, but we do know, historically speaking, that no matter what the cause has been, no matter the depth or what have you of the various and many bear markets that we've gone through, if you have a couple of years of money set aside and you've got a portfolio that is well positioned to not protect you from the volatility, which is an important point, but over time has proven to outpace significantly what I consider the biggest threat to somebody's retirement income, which is not volatility, but is your cost of living rising. And for many folks that we talk to, having that cash bucket for contingencies set aside has been something that doesn't solve everything, but it does provide some sort of cushion, both literally and emotionally, for folks.
Yeah. Well, as I was just listening to you say 2 years of, I mean, man, that's a lot of money to park aside. And I imagine, yeah, psychologically it feels good to know that for 2 years, right? I'm covered. But you did say something that piqued my interest. You said, protect me from volatility and then the rising cost of living. So I'm thinking, okay, so if, back to the original answer to the question about people on the cusp of retirement, and your salary goes from being the salary that you get from your employer or the money that you take from your business, if your portfolio becomes your salary provider. So if I'm in my 70s and 80s, now people may not want to think about that, or maybe they're there, right? 70s or 80s. Where do I need to be with this portfolio? How is this portfolio going to provide for me? If I'm 50 now and I want to have this thing feed and clothe and bathe and provide for me, not only for me, but for future generations. Yeah, what kind of, you said protect from volatility. What kind of volatility do I need to be exposed to in order for this thing to be able to actually work as the engine that it is?
Yeah, well, let me ask you, if in fact you want to be and you seek to be protected from this volatility, what type of risk does that expose you to? And I think you're getting at it in your question, right?
Yeah.
Are you willing to put yourself at risk of being 75 or 80 years old at that point and, quote unquote, running out of money and outliving the amount of money that you've accumulated? Not that you haven't saved diligently, not that you didn't have every intention of making trying to put yourself in the best financial circumstances you possibly can. But what if your strategy was wrong? Your strategy of, I'm paraphrasing the words you use in your question, but your strategy of something on the surface sounds reasonable, which is trying to shield yourself and your portfolio from volatility. What do you do then, entertaining that notion? What do you do when in your perhaps 50s and 60s, or when you're entering retirement, one of your main objectives is to shield yourself from volatility? And we all know that right? It's empirical evidence that, right? Let me use just more traditional phrases. The more risk, the more return. The less risk, the less return. So if you're on the latter phrase and you're saying, okay, I want less risk, I don't want to experience volatility in retirement. And what happens if that quote unquote strategy turns into something down the road where you have put yourself at risk of outliving your assets at 75 or 80 years old? That's, I'm not trying to avoid the answer. I'm just trying to give folks something to think about in terms of what may feel safe might not be so safe. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I'm having like a, oh, that would not be good. To be, because as you're speaking, it occurs to me that the real risk is not what people using again traditional terms, the risk of being in the market. The real risk is this, oh my gosh, I am not going to make it. My money's not going to last. Like the real risk is actually running out of money. The real risk is not being exposed to the fluctuations of the market.
Talk about being out of control.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right. Didn't at the beginning of when we started this today, we talked about that feeling of losing control, right? When you go through any transition, when things are not as familiar to you, because you just haven't been in this part of your life yet, you're entering a different part of your life, you feel like a sense of you've lost a little control, in particular to this subject of your earning power, right? Because now you're counting in your portfolio. But gosh, what happens if the strategy is wrong and you're 75 or 80 years old and you've lost your financial independence? That's tough.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
You use the word risk and then you use the word volatility.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that?
So volatility is my definition, my words. The rate or the fluctuation of the value of your investments in the short term, right? Going through a year like this year, we've seen some great, tremendous volatility throughout the year. You know, the value, anybody that has money invested, the value of your portfolio, depending on how you're invested, has had some swings associated with it, swings in value. So that, to me, in so many words, is the definition of volatility. Risk, on the other hand, while those two words are used interchangeably, like it's common, right, Robbie, to hear, I don't want a portfolio too risky.
Yeah, you just said it. You said more risk, more return, less risk,
Right.
You said that.
Right. So, okay, so going a little bit on that, I don't want a portfolio too risky. What does that actually mean to me? Or the next question I ask is actually the question you just asked me. Well, what does risk mean to you? And to me, risk is not volatility. Volatility, it's proven, is short term. Yet risk, in the context of entering retirement and being in retirement, to me, is the risk of the strategy not working, the risk of getting to a point in your life where your assets that you have are no longer able to support your lifestyle. That, to me, is risk. Volatility is something that is a point in time. And anybody entering retirement has to understand. Now, whether they end up investing this way or not, ultimately is up to them, but they have to understand that volatility is temporary. And the markets, the diversified markets owning great companies over long periods of time, has never lost anybody any money. Losing money in the stock market is a human endeavor, not a economic or market phenomenon. So we do experience fluctuations of value in your portfolio as we're going through this year and as we go through all the time. That to us is not risk. Risk is the strategy right or wrong for what you're trying to accomplish? And does that make sense in terms of the differentiation of risk and volatility?
Totally. And it's such a shift from just what people understand in mainstream, whether you turn on the news or whatever, and it's that they don't speak about it like this. And the way that people get all hyped, all the hype around market volatility puts people in kind of a fearful position. Whereas what you're saying is saying, this is the good stuff. This is like the vitamin you want to take. Your portfolio needs the volatility and you should be in it, because otherwise you run the real risk of not making it at all. So that's a really powerful distinction. I also loved what you just said about losing money in the markets as a human endeavor. Wow. Right? Because I'm the one that gets in the way of my success or failure by not being able to withstand the volatility.
And I may have said it that way, and that's my words, but the concept itself is not new, right? I mean, there's a guy out there, Warren Buffett, many people have probably heard of, that talks about this really, or has talked about this particular phenomenon all the time. And I actually just recently watched a clip of him speaking at a large meeting where he talks about intellect as it's correlated or not with success in investing. And in so many words, I'll paraphrase, but in so many words, his intellect really has nothing to do with it. The most successful investors, novice or otherwise, or professional, are ones that have the greatest temperament. Temperament versus intellect. And I see how that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense for us because intellect really, when we're talking about something that is unknown and happening in the future, intellect can only take you so far, and it's very little, right? Because you nor me nor the top PhD in economics in the world does not know what's happening tomorrow or next year, right? Or is going to predict a global pandemic or anything like that. So this comes down to your understanding and ultimately getting to a level of comfort of looking back at history and saying, geez, look at all the things that we as human beings, the economy has had to withstand over these long periods of time. Yet look at us as human beings in these companies again, and how we've been able to innovate and work through all of the many challenges, which ultimately has produced, for all intents and purposes, an average of about 10% per year in terms of average annual return over long periods of time. I'm talking about the diversified stock market, owning a number of the best companies in the world over long periods of time. That's a fact. That's a historical fact. So if you have confidence in humanity and you're optimistic. I don't mean to be facetious at all. I'm just, if you're an optimist about why we get out of bed in the morning, right? In terms of human beings to achieve and to innovate and to gain fulfillment, not just monetarily, but personal fulfillment in terms of achievement. And because a company is not a company, yes, is an entity, but a company really is a collection of human beings working towards a common goal. And when those human beings are all working best and the management of that company is strong and they're able to innovate and produce, and that drives the value up of that company. And the world is filled with these companies, and we benefit over long periods of time by investing in these same companies. And so all the things we talked about today, risk and volatility and nervousness, trepidation about my retirement, and I think taking a big step back and looking down at what is all this about, or what should it be about in my portfolio, and am I comfortable understanding that, hey, this has worked tremendously over history, and I want to make sure that I can benefit from that, and continually throughout retirement continue to build my income so that all my capital that I have earned and accumulated outlives me and is able to impact future generations and causes and everything that's important to me and my family going forward. That's what it means to me.
I love it. What I particularly appreciate is how much perspective you bring to this. I have so many takeaways from this conversation about having hope and optimism, and that there really is such amazing potential, and companies that you guys actually work with companies or invest in companies, find companies that are good companies or great companies getting even better. And so that's an inspiration to take the conversation that started at a point of anxiety and to bring it to a place of inspiration. That's amazing, and that's why I so enjoy talking with you.
Thank you. And and likewise, and there's a book, right, that talks a lot about this, that is near and dear to our heart. You want to talk just a second about the book?
Well, I mean, I'll just say what it is, and maybe you can speak about your relationship with the book. It's called Dancing with the Analysts, and it is a financial thriller. So it's not really anything that's like bookish or academic. It's a fast-paced novel about a young man who inherits a significant amount of money and is up to a challenge. A challenge has been set for him. And in a way, it mirrors a lot of our journeys, right? Because like at some point, most people are not going to hit the lottery. Most people are not going to inherit something, but we will all hopefully acquire access to this savings, to the investments that we've been accruing over time. And in some ways, that is a kind of a lottery win. What do you do with that money? So, yeah, that's my little synopsis, but I'm hoping you can add something to add to that.
Well, I love how you put that, because it's right. And when I think of the word inheritance, while traditionally you think of, oh, you all of a sudden get this windfall from this outside source, whether somebody in your family passed away or you winning the lottery or what have you, but isn't retiring and now accessing the capital that you've accumulated over a long period of time, isn't that sort of like an inheritance, right? It's money that you haven't touched for a long period of time, and now if it's a retirement account, you've hit the age. Now you've surpassed the age where the IRS allows you to start taking money without being penalized. So in a lot of ways, you can look at your accumulated capital, your retirement capital, as an inheritance in some way, shape, or form. Of when you hit a certain age and you choose to retire, that's your inheritance. And now, just like in the book, you're tasked with a challenge of figuring out how you can achieve a certain amount of return on this inheritance, on this capital, over a long period of time. And in a retiree's case, is to achieve your long-term goals, with retirement income and supporting your lifestyle being one of them. And for a lot of folks that we work with, there's certainly other very important aspects too that they want to achieve as well. And so the book, to me, while it covers, as you said, a specific circumstance of a younger gentleman receiving an inheritance and having this challenge, having this task, the book to me is really represents what all retirees are going through as well, and the decisions that they're going to be faced with, and how incredibly important it is to be educated on this topic or have the right professional or professionals helping you make the decisions that are going to impact significantly whether or not you're able to achieve those goals down the road.
Yeah.
Dancing with the Analysts by David Malik. It's a book that changed my life, has changed the lives of our clients, and we for folks that reach out to us and inquire, we'll actually send you a copy of the book to introduce you to it. And you can reach out to us at social@beckbode.com, or find us via our numerous social media sites, from Instagram @Beck Bode and others. Really enjoyed this today, Rabia.
Me too. So good to see you.
So good to
Want
see
to
you.
introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Ben Beck. I'm the Chief Investment Officer of and co-managing partner of Beck Bode. We are a wealth management firm located or headquartered in Dedham, Massachusetts. But as I mentioned very early in the call, we have various locations, our newest location being in Traverse City, Michigan. And I'm currently sitting at my home in my wife's office today. I'm not in my regular office upstairs, so changing up the location all the time. And what about you, Rabia?
Keeping things interesting. So my name is Rabia Tagavi, and I'm a big fan, friend, and follower of Beck Bode, all things Beck Bode, and really appreciate your very deliberate view on investing in life. It's always providing me with different perspectives of looking at things. So thank you so much for inviting me along on this journey.
All right. Thanks, Robbie. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.